All right, we got 1 minute after 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started today. First of all, we'd like to welcome everybody back to the Legislative Oversight Investigations Committee. And I will point out we have added a new committee member, Representative Jason Petrie. Welcome, Representative Petrie. And I'd also like to recognize a new grad fellow, Ralph Banstubbs. He's a second-year law student at University of Louisville. He's a former Navy hospital corpsman and a Department of Justice legal assistant. Ralph, thank you for being here. We look forward to working with you. All right, with that, we will call this meeting to order and we'll do a roll call.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Carroll, Senator Douglas,
Present.
Senator Neal, Senator Nemes, Senator Thomas, Representative Blanton,
Present.
Representative Burke,
Here.
Representative Fleming, Representative Lockett,
Here.
Representative Riley, Representative Sharp,
Present.
Representative Stevenson, Representative Petrie, Vice Chair Howell, Co-Chair Storm,
Here.
and Co-Chair Bowling.
I am here.
Thank you.
Very good, and hopefully everybody has had a chance to review the minutes, if they have so, and got a motion on the minutes and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Very good. And at this time, we're going to have our first presenter today, Mrs. Megan Sandfoss. She's the Executive Director of the Office of Broadband Development. Megan, please make your way to the table. Introduce yourself for the record. And
I'm Megan Sandfoss. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Broadband Development.
thank you for being here. You're obviously over one of our state's newer offices, but someone that has a lot of resources committed to the office. A very important thing as we move into as we're moving into the future to make sure we have broadband rolled out, not just in areas that have historically had it, but that we have it across the state. Obviously, we put some state resources aside for this. There has been some federal resources come into play as well. And so if you will, please, if you give us a good overview today. Thank you.
Sure. So the office was established in September of 2022. So we are going on 2 years now. And I'll just give an update on the rounds of awards, grant awards that we've already announced. The first round, there were 47 awards totaling $89.6 million, leveraging another over $100 million in total additional investment. So for $203 million total investment, that touched 36 counties. For those projects, 4 projects have been withdrawn, but the remaining contracts have been executed. So the total committed for that round is $88.1 million. Disbursements to date total just over $10 million. So there are a number of projects under construction. We have about 15 of them that are over 80% complete. And we have been doing inspections as they near completion to make sure that everything is operating the way it's supposed to and everyone's meeting their commitments. And sure.
I'm sorry, need my mic on. Yeah. So someone puts in for a project, it is selected, it's given the green light, so to speak. And you mentioned in this first round there were 47 projects, $88 million, about $10 million has been dispersed. Mm-hmm. You did mention that there were about 80% completed, the construction of those?
15 of them are 80% completed.
15 or 80%
Yes.
completed. Okay. But can you walk us through the process as far as once one is awarded, the steps after that, the work, and then how are they paid as well? Are they paid up front? Is it on a reimbursement type process?
So once they're awarded, issue a grant agreement contract, and then that once that's executed, for the first round, those were able to go to construction, or if they were ready, if they had the permits and everything all lined up. That I think has been a factor in the delay of some of these projects, is some of the permitting requirements from railroads or pole attachments. Those are some of the barriers that the providers are facing when they're trying to implement these projects. We pay out on a reimbursement basis, so they will submit a draw request to us, and then our staff will review it, and then issue payment based on the expenses.
Okay, so from the time they submit that request for payment and then the time it takes to receive that, how long is that process?
It depends on whether or not the what they have submitted is complete and enough, to document their costs. We had some projects come in where we need a little bit more information on the request, so that sometimes delays it. But if everything's correct, I mean, we can disperse funds within a week.
Okay. But like your typical turnaround time on that, what have you seen so far?
Typical, we've had some come in and be paid out within the same week.
Okay. Are there any out there that have been going on past a week or a month or several months, and there's large amounts of money owed to them, or was awarded to them that they think they're owed for that they have not gotten paid for yet?
There have been some that have had some issues with the documentation that they provided us, being able to substantiate the expenses that we are, being asked to disperse.
Okay. All right.
But the staff has been in communication with that, with the provider, and trying to work through it and able to make partial payments for the things that are able to be substantiated.
Okay. Thank you.
So for the second round of funding, that was the remaining state and local fiscal recovery funds and the entire capital projects fund allocation. We awarded $206 million to 57 projects reaching 45,500 locations. Those projects are in the contracting phase. We have received about 70% of the contracts back from when we sent them out. There are a couple that are outstanding due to requested contract language changes that we are working through between legal counsel. So 2 of the projects that have executed contracts are in the middle of their environmental review process, and we've been facilitating some streamlined processes with like Heritage Council and other permitting agencies, just to kind of smooth over some of the hiccups. So in the 2024 to 26 biennial budget that was just passed, there was $19.9 million in there for pole replacements, and that was $4 million for pole owners to hire temporary workers to help manage the volume of pole attachment permits, $2 million to the Kentucky Association of Electric Cooperatives to administer for pole replacement activities, and then $2 million to the Office of Broadband Development to support hiring temporary workers for the investor-owned utilities and other pole owners. And then the remaining funds in that pool will be used to continue our pole replacement reimbursement grant program. So I've been meeting with the internet providers and the Association of Electric Cooperatives to develop the programs for that, which will begin on July 1st. But the big thing that we've got coming up is the BEAD program, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. That is the over $1 billion allocation to the Commonwealth for broadband deployment to unserved and underserved areas. So we submitted our 5-year action plan last August, which established the goals and priorities for the BEAD program and serves as a comprehensive needs assessment for the BEAD program. The next step in that was the initial proposal, which we submitted in December. The initial proposal is 2 parts. We call it Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 describes the challenge process, which is what we use to determine eligible locations. And Volume 2 describes the subgrantee selection process. Volume 1, we received approval on that from NTIA in March, and that allowed us to begin the challenge process, which will determine eligibility for BEAD funds down to the location level. So, every location in Kentucky had a designation, whether it was served, unserved, or underserved. That began on May 6th, and the first phase was the challenge submission phase, where the eligible challengers, which are internet providers, local governments, and nonprofits, could submit challenges to the data that we put out. Locations that have existing federal or state funding are excluded from eligibility. That is the federal policy on that. So if there's already an existing grant, that location is not going to be eligible for additional funding. Internet providers were permitted to challenge locations where they are in the process of extending broadband through June 30th of next year.
All right. And I believe we have a question on that. Senator Carroll.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to interrupt. When you talk about location, define that. Most of the complaints these days are kind of the last mile individual homes. Is that done by a particular region, or when you say location?
So location is, so the FCC calls it a broadband serviceable location. So it's a location like a home or a business that would purchase a broadband subscription from a provider.
So it's broken down to the individual.
Yeah, so it's really like on a basic level address point data. So it's not the same as our 911 addresses or any other kind of database like that. It doesn't even really match with what the providers use for their own customer database. So that's there's a way to match addresses, but it's not exact. But it's that is what we have to use by the requirements of the program.
And so the grant goes down to that level,
Yes.
to the specific homes.
So
Okay.
even if a location or a house on a road had service to the neighboring properties, a location could still be designated as unserved if it didn't have internet.
Okay.
And that's what we were determining in the challenge process.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I've got a question
Yes.
on that challenge process. I saw the dashboard you have, and I saw there was close to 379,000 challenges. Is that correct?
So after we had accepted all of the other bulk submissions that were in our and that had been submitted, it actually went up to 385, almost 386,000. So yeah, it was a lot.
Okay. And it looks like y'all have gone through those, and it says that roughly two thirds have been approved,
Yes.
and a third are still under review.
Yeah. So we started to review the plan, service, and enforceable commitment challenges as they came in, because those were not something that is subject to rebuttal. That was the way it was described in our volume 1. But when some of the challenges that came in that are like an entity challenging another entity's service, we wanted to wait until the majority of those came in close to the deadline before we started approving those, because of just the notifications that went out to all of the providers when we received challenges. We didn't want to flood anybody's inboxes. So the challenge process ended Monday, and the rebuttal window started Tuesday. So it's been a busy week, but the majority of the challenges that came in are the plan, service, and enforceable commitment type that where providers are trying to demonstrate that they're in the process of serving areas, or they already do serve it, or they have plans to do it in the next year. So like I said, the internet providers also challenge locations where they have new service availability that was not reflected in the initial data. This is based on the underlying data is based on FCC filings. So those are done twice a year. Locations reported as served by DSL were modified to underserved based on a pre-challenge modification included in our volume 1. So if a provider was reporting 100 by 20 or greater service at a location with DSL, we modified those to underserved because we're under the opinion that DSL is an obsolete technology, and that if we're going to be building networks, we ought to improve it for everybody. We also challenge locations, we also changed locations to underserved based on a year of speed test data that we obtained from a common speed test provider, and those were just a kind of a check on what's being reported. So if there was a difference between what's being reported on to the FCC and what the speed tests in the area are saying, we were able to modify those. And then nonprofits and local governments also submitted individual level speed test challenges on behalf of residents who took speed tests on 3 separate days and provided us information about their subscription. And so that was all what went into the challenge process. So we actually received over 400,000 challenges, but not all of those were met the level of evidence required to actually be considered, by the office as legit, like actual challenges. So we did reject a number of them. So, but not the majority. We have a lot to look at here. So we are conducting this through an online portal, which was a requirement by the NTIA. The challenge rebuttal phase lasts 20 business days from when ISPs are notified of challenges. So they have about a month to review and rebut those. And after the rebuttal period closes, we will adjudicate any disputed challenges, as well as challenges. We're going to continue to review challenges that were not subject to rebuttal. The NTIA must approve our challenge outcome data before we may award funds. There are states that are going through that process right now, so we know how to do it the right way based on their notes from that. Volume 2 is in the final stages of the review process, and once that happens, once our initial proposal is totally approved, 20% of our allocation will be released, which is about $200 million. And that funding has to be directed to unserved economically distressed areas. That's the priority in the BEAD NOFO.
So when would you expect that disbursement to happen?
Fairly soon, I'd say within the month. So once we have approval of Volume 2, we can start our subgrantee selection process. We can't award any funds until we have the challenge process data approved, but we can start the process of accepting applications. We're going to do that in 2 phases. We're going to have a pre-qualification phase where the interested applicants submit all of their technical, managerial, and financial data all at once, so that if they intend to submit more than one application, they don't have to do that over and over again. So that will be the first part, and then we will open up the applications for the specific project areas. After the subgrantee selection process, we have to prepare and submit the final proposal to NTIA, and we have to have that approved before the rest of the funding, the remaining 80% of the BEAD funds, will be available. We do anticipate that even though we only have 20% to start with, we will look at projects for the 100% of the allocation. So the early 20% will get a little bit of a head start on deployment, where the remaining projects that are anticipated to be awarded will have to wait until the final proposal is approved. But I just heard from NTIA last week that they do expect that we can submit projects for the final proposal incrementally as we approve them and review them. So I don't know what that means, and
Okay, so you could start submitting them, and if they approve them, they would send that amount of money back to you to go ahead and get started on? Okay.
So the caveat to that is that we do have to ensure that we'll serve 100% of the unserved and underserved locations. So we have to have a pretty solid plan to be able to move forward with that. So we have been working on developing an online grant application portal for the application process, and we will be publishing the subgrantee selection guidance within the next month so that the potential applicants can start to prepare their application materials. So that is my update.
Very good. Let me ask you, your office setup, how many employees do you all have in that office now?
Currently, we have 4 full-time employees and then 3 contractors.
Okay.
And we do have plans to add additional staff in the very near future. I'll be posting additional positions, hope to add about 5 more team members.
Okay. And what roles do you have currently filled?
So currently we have a federal program specialist and 2 grant administrators, and then myself.
Okay. So those are more set up for the getting everything set up to be able to receive the funds and to vet different
Yes,
proposals, I
yes.
would say.
Yes.
When it comes time to letting some and getting this money out the door and the construction is done and you're talking about, all combined state and federal monies, $1.5 billion, how are we making sure, how is the state making sure that the work is done construction management wise or engineering wise in a good manner?
So we will hire consultants to help us review the technical aspects of the applications and then also conduct field validation of the projects to make sure that they are implemented the way they were designed.
Okay. So you will do that as on a PRN basis, or they will be full-time employees that will do this type work?
We'll likely award a contract to a consulting firm or firms to do that work for us. So they wouldn't be full-time employees because the work could be very sporadic. But having a consultant like on a retainer basis would be what we would look at doing.
Okay. And when would you envision this happening, that part of the process?
This summer.
This summer?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions from the committee? Chairman Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good, thank you. I'd be interested to be able to follow along the process by timing more than anything else. So we've had state, some since it's round 1 and round 2, probably started technically in 21, pushed into 22, offices created for other purposes as federal monies are becoming available. I'd like to know date of receipt of application for a project, when approved, status of reimbursement. Mm-hmm. So we've got an idea of how much of that first round has been completed on what kind of timetable. Okay. Same thing for the round 2. And then now we're just getting into the edge of the BEAD funding. So I don't know that you would have anything on that, but if you would mind, okay, to get that back to the committee so we can see that and follow timetables and go, okay, this is where we may have a lax part of the system or a really tight part of the system, and just so we can follow along and we know whether phase 1, phase 2, how close to completion those are at.
Yeah, we can do that. So all of the round 1 projects are estimated completion in January of 26, or at least by that point. So the round 2 have to be completed by the end of 2026.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
And also in that, and I'd like you to speak on it too some, but where the projects are, where the awards are happening. Are there areas of the state? I mean, a map would be great,
Okay.
if you could just see it from that level.
Okay.
Are they going more rural areas? Are they going more urban areas? Are they going more east, west, north, south? Just all that data would be very good to have.
So map of distribution and project timelines. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it's possible, can we get that by rounds also? Because there's a little bit of different setup structure in each one of those rounds, so we can see if the distributions were affected by that.
Yeah, that'd be very good.
Okay.
Thank you. And then a question I've had that, just kind of thinking about, but obviously the purpose of the BEAD money is to go to areas, the unserved areas, and go to those and get service into those areas. We are depending on having partners, ISPs, other groups to be able to get this deployed. What happens when there are unserved areas where we don't have any proposals? Are you seeing that? Do you expect to see that? And then is there a plan for, okay, we've gone through, first round, second round, third round, and we still have these areas where nobody's biting on these.
Yeah. So that is something we did address in volume 2. We do have to do at least one round of competitive applications, which is a program requirement. But after that, we are able to go into a negotiation for unserved areas that have no proposals. So that is what we plan to do, and we do have the ability to waive the matching requirements if a project requires it, and leveraging other these funds can be matched with ARC funds, so that's a potential too, is using a combination of sources to get those projects funded.
Very good. And I see no other questions from the committee today, so I certainly appreciate you giving us an update, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. You're over a very important office in our state, something that's going to give us a lot of return on investment for our state and help a lot of people. So keep up the work, and make sure you check in regularly.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, and next we have follow-up from the November meeting, Department of Education response to the K-12 curriculum development and instructional materials selection. I believe we've got Ms. Mickey Ray and Ms. Sarah Peace at the table today. If you will, introduce yourselves for the record, and the show is yours.
Good afternoon, Mickey Ray, Chief Academic Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Sarah Peace, I'm the Policy Advisor for the Department of Education, and I am, there we go, bringing up our slideshow now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Co-Chair Bowling and Co-Chair Storm, for the invitation today, and members of the committee. Sarah and I are happy to be here to discuss the State Textbook Commission and the work that the KDE and local districts are doing around instructional resource adoption and implementation. I'd like to begin today with the current statutory requirement for the State Textbook Commission. You can see on the slide there that KRS 156.405 states that the purpose of the State Textbook Commission is to provide a recommended list of current and high-quality textbooks and instructional materials to local school districts that complement the educational programming in Kentucky schools. They are tasked with providing a consumer guide to schools to aid with the selection process and to provide for public participation in the evaluation. The Kentucky Department of Education and the State Textbook Commission shall also receive assistance from textbook reviewers, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit more as we go along. The next slide is an overview of the statutory responsibilities. You can see there that the commission is to direct the activities of those textbook reviewers. They are subject-specific and content-specific reviewers. They are to develop and approve the selection and evaluation criteria. They are also tasked with recommending a list of high-quality materials, providing for public comment, and publishing and distributing those consumer guides. The textbook reviewers, they look at it just as that, from a subject-specific lens, and they review the textbooks and programming to determine if they are in fact of high quality and recommend those approvals to the commission for their review as well. But since the passage of our existing textbook statutes, the landscape for instructional resources has changed dramatically. In 2022, KRS 345 was amended in Senate Bill 1 to give local superintendents authority over instructional resource selection for the district. This is also seen in the Read to Succeed Act, so Senate Bill 9 of 2022, and in the Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act in this most recent session, that was House Bill 162 of 2024. But specifically in 160.345, per subsection 2G, the local superintendent shall determine which curriculum, textbooks, instructional materials, and student support services shall be provided in the school after consulting with the local Board of Education, the school principal, the school council, and after a reasonable review and response period for stakeholders in accordance with local Board of Education policy. So transparency, communication, and consultation with educators, board members, students, families, and community members is a key part of the selection process. And the KDE has created many tools to support local districts in encouraging and facilitating public participation in that evaluation process. And I will speak more to the specifics of that engagement as we advance. This slide, we use this often, and it points to strengthening Tier 1 instruction. And Tier 1 is the instruction that's provided to 100% of students across the Commonwealth. And you can see here, vibrant student experience and access to grade level learning are the ultimate intent of our academic standards. But we do recognize that schools and districts need support in implementing the standards at the local level in a way that truly impacts the student experience and classroom instruction. On this slide is a visual representation of the critical actions necessary for this to occur. It focuses on the movement from vision to impacts of high quality instruction and improved student experience and outcomes. Articulating a common instructional vision for each content area is a key first step and serves as a sieve for local resource evaluation. The selected instructional resources and its components should align to that instructional vision that's developed at the local level, as well as have alignment to the Kentucky academic standards. Next, local leaders must equip teachers and empower students with access to strong local curriculum supported by high-quality instructional resources that provide the necessary tools to actualize that vision. The use of high-quality instructional resources in support of a strong local curriculum is critical for ensuring students have access to grade-level, standards-aligned instruction. Yet simply giving educators an HQIR is not enough to support them in making the instructional shifts necessary to provide vibrant student experiences. Educators need to engage in high-quality professional learning that builds their understanding of the resource and how to effectively implement that for the benefit of their students. So educators need curriculum-based professional learning and ongoing coaching and support in how to implement the resource in order to meet the diverse needs of students who are sitting in their classrooms across the state. HQPL, High Quality Professional Learning, is the third key action and serves as the linchpin that connects the use of the HQIR to high quality instruction and ultimately to that student experience and their outcomes. When districts work to ensure that these pieces are in place, we see the full impact on instruction and the student experience. So on the next slide, you'll see high-quality instructional resources are a critical component of strengthening Tier 1, and with feedback from the Quality Curriculum Task Force, the Instructional Resource Reviewers, and our pilot districts, the KDE has established the following definition of high-quality instructional resources. And these resources are not the textbooks of old. They are extensive and they have numerous supports for the teacher in how to implement that instruction, but they also have many more supports for the benefit of students who may need to have an entry point into that grade level learning in different capacities. But we do want to practice what we preach in terms of providing you with the evidence basis. And so I want to draw your attention. I'm going to focus a little bit on the first three bullets here. So HQIRs that are aligned to state standards can reduce variability in the quality of instruction across classrooms and can help to boost student achievement, and that was found from SREB in 2017. You'll see in the next one, students in classrooms that use one high-quality instructional resource for 4 consecutive years outpaced comparison students by a margin of 38 percentile points. That's an equivalent to 4 years of learning. So simply being in a classroom in which the teacher has access to those resources and the student has access to grade level learning aligned to the standards has the potential for 4 additional years of learning for that student. And then the third one there, teachers reported spending 7 hours per week or 250 hours per year developing or selecting instructional materials. So when teachers are looking for resources, if they don't have access to that HQIR at the district level, they'll tend to go to places such as Google, Teachers Pay Teachers, Pinterest, and that's really just to name a few. But this results in the use of unvetted resources that are often low in quality and rigor and are only loosely aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, and that would, of course, lead to inequities for the student learning experience. In light of the change in the market from traditional textbooks to HQIR, I want to next share the actions we are currently taking to support local districts in the evaluation and selection of instructional resources and offer a few key recommendations for this work. So in the absence of sustainable funding for the Commission, the agency has worked since 2019 to ensure the key responsibilities of the State Textbook Commission have continued to be accomplished with a focus on optimal effectiveness and cost efficiency. The Quality Curriculum Task Force was established to review evaluation criteria and associated KDE guidance and to provide feedback on the tools and resources needed for local HQIR evaluation and selection. And that task force, as you can see there, includes 21 members, and that's composed of district leaders, teachers, library and media specialists, educational cooperative representatives, and members of post-secondary institutions. And those members provide feedback on all of the guidance and resources that you'll see on the second half of that slide. The KDE further meets with members of the content-specific advisory panels and review committee established in KRS 158.6453, who review and revise the Kentucky academic standards. And so these standards writers are serving as our current instructional resource reviewers, and truly there are no better experts in terms of being able to determine alignment and coherence to the academic standards than the teachers and educators who have contributed to the revision of those standards documents. On the second side, I want to touch on the resources that are currently available. All of these are posted online for district utilization, and we have numerous meetings throughout the year in which these resources are given a spotlight for the benefit of local leaders. So you can see here, the KDE supports local HQIR coordinators, and this was formerly known as the state textbook coordinators, but so now the HQIR coordinators. We have 166 identified HQIR coordinators in the role manager system, and for the remaining 6, we communicate directly with superintendents, and we feel that that is appropriate as they are the ultimate decision makers on curriculum selection, but we want to ensure that for their teams, they have access to the information that will best support them in selecting and evaluating the best resource to match their local context. You'll notice there the model curriculum framework, which is required in KRS 158.6451, also establishes a curriculum development process. And that does include the selection of HQIR. So the curriculum development process includes key tools for working with vendors, for communicating with stakeholders, and for eliciting public comment. Specifically, the MCF and the consumer guides include a communication plan template for each phase of the process. And that would be for communicating with educators within the district, with parents and families who have students within that district, and also with community members at large. We have sample stakeholder questions for focus group activities or open houses that districts might have to elicit that public comment and feedback from parents and families. And then lastly, we also have a consensus protocol for the teams who are working together to select the resource that would best align to the local vision for that particular content area. The KDEs also published 3 consumer guides. There's one for mathematics, for reading and writing, and for science. And those are available on our website. And each guide begins with their evaluation process with the green rated resources from Ed Reports. And I know that I spoke on this previously, but I want to revisit that just a bit. So Ed Reports is a nonprofit organization. It's often described as the consumer reports of instructional resources. They are a for educator by educator organization that publishes free reviews of K through 12 instructional materials using an educator-led approach that measures standards alignment, usability, and a few other criteria. They review for-profit and nonprofit resources as well as open education resources. They actively work with Kentucky educators as part of their curriculum review teams. And Kentucky superintendents can feel confident that a green-rated resource on Ed Reports has at least 80% alignment to the Kentucky academic standards. And that's compelling because, as I mentioned, some of the resources that teachers would utilize from Teachers Pay Teachers, from Pinterest, they can have as little as 20% alignment to our standards documents. For literacy specifically, the Knowledge Matters campaign, the Reading League, and others offer curriculum reviews as well, but without doubt, Ed Reports is the most comprehensive source for that external validation. So their curriculum reviews are selected for their content expertise. The reviewers spend over 150 hours evaluating each instructional resource series. So every reviewer on a team reviews every single page of those materials. The KDE also has instructional resource alignment rubrics that are available for review for anything that is unrated by Ed Reports. And this is especially important when we think about supplemental resources that are utilized at the local level. And so that, as you would hope, that rubric is explicitly aligned to our Kentucky academic standards documents. So the KDE would welcome further discussion around updating existing state textbook statutes to better align to the new landscape. But for KRS 156.405 specifically, the KDE would recommend renaming the commission to denote shifts in instructional resource adoption versus textbooks only. We also would recommend repurposing the commission to focus on supporting local districts in the evaluation, selection, and use of HQIR by modifying their responsibilities to maximize their effort. So to develop and approve that selection criteria, the evaluation forms as we've mentioned, publishing the consumer guides to support school and district implementation, but rather than reviewing all the materials, we would recommend they be asked to provide feedback on the gateways, selection criteria, and evaluation tools to ensure alignment to the Kentucky academic standards for local resource review. We would also recommend engaging more stakeholders as part of the process. So the State Textbook Commission has a 10-membership committee. The Quality Curriculum Task Force that's currently being utilized at the KDE has a 21-member membership. Additionally, the advisory panels and review committee members per KRS 158.6453, we would recommend that they be utilized as the instructional resource reviewers. And there are approximately 30 educators who participate on the advisory panel and review committee versus the 12 members that are denoted in statute as textbook reviewers. We also want to continue to elevate the tools for public and community involvement and feedback. But in terms of repurposing the funds, if Kentucky educators are not reviewing the resources themselves, funding can be shifted from the State Textbook Commission itself and provided to local school district use for the purchase and adoption of HQIR. And then members of the commission and instructional resource reviewers would be reimbursed for travel expenses. all of the things that we would ask them, subcharges and other things that would be needed if we asked them to attend in person and be away from their schools and districts. And this is important because when we think about if Ed Reports reviewers are spending 150 hours on a single resource, for the State Textbook Commission, we're only allowed to have 10 meetings per year. And I mean, it would take 20 meetings to meet that 150-hour requirement, and that's just one singular resource. So we would argue that it would be better serving to local districts to enact in the role of the Quality Curriculum Task Force by providing feedback, reviewing the criteria, rather than spending their time away from their schools, away from their districts, pouring through each of the instructional resources when there are other parties who are doing that more effectively. And then lastly, you can see they require reporting of resource adoption to the KDE. So right now, we do have a voluntary survey. For 23-24, we had 136 of the 171 districts respond to that survey. But we are not getting the information from all 171. And we feel like we do need the statutory authority to make that a true requirement per law. But moving forward, we are very hopeful that the districts that are currently voluntary reporting, we've created a dashboard, and we would love for them to be able to consider utilization of that, just to know which districts are using the resources that they may be considering. We would love for them to consider pooling resources for that curriculum-based professional learning that was addressed previously, for cost-saving mechanisms. So there are many ways that having access to that information would be helpful, not only to the KDE, but much more so to the local districts themselves. So that does complete my presentation. We are very happy to accept any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you very much. And I believe we do have a question, Representative Blanton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have two, if I may.
Go right ahead.
So thank you, Ms. Ray and Ms. Peace, for your presentation today. And going back to the first statute there that you read, 156.405, and throughout your presentation you made comments about the public comment portions. And one slide you touched on at the local level, open houses and things like that. How are we ensuring that parents are being notified that there is this opportunity for review and public comment? How are we ensuring that parents are aware that this is available?
Thank you for your question, Representative. So we feel that per KRS 160.345, that change that gave the authority to the local superintendents for this process, it includes that consultation and review period time. So in all of the guidance that the KDE has provided in that curriculum development process, there are multiple touch points in which local districts are encouraged to engage with stakeholders around the different resources. And I can give you a couple examples of what that could look like. There are several districts who participate in our pilot program. When they narrowed down from the vast number of resources to the 3 that they were actively considering, they would have an open house sort of parent meeting, community meeting, where folks could truly come in and have their hands on the resources and take a look at those and give feedback to the district in that capacity. Others have had, when they have made the final selection, they have published that, posted that online, so they've done that more virtually. But we believe that in order to be in alignment with 160.345, that consultation is a required part of the process.
Okay, thank you. And question number 2.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it's more of a suggestion, I'm not sure, but either way. So on your 21-member task force, no question, quality people that should be there. But one that I noticed at least is not mentioned specifically in there, again, going back, is parents. And I bring these things up because I'm thinking if we've got parents involved in this process from the get-go, we cut down these later things that's making the news when parents are throwing fits over things. If we bring them in on the process from the beginning and try to curtail some of that. So there is no parents on that task force, correct?
So we were mirroring in many ways the 10-member committee that's on the statutorily required state textbook commission, but I respect and appreciate that idea, and I think that we would have very little difficulty curating parents who would be willing to participate in that process.
I think it just gives other parents that see, okay, well, parents were involved, a little bit of more comfort level maybe
Sure.
to the process.
I will say many of the folks on the quality curriculum task force do have children, so they have multiple lenses, but they are there representing more of an educational role, not the role of parent and family.
Right.
And so I hear that and think that is a quality recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Douglas has a question or two.
May I have two questions, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir, you may.
Thank you. I'm going to start out with a very simple question. What's the purpose of our education system here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky?
I would say that the purpose of that is to ensure that our students are graduating and can be successful, not only in career, but in their life, and find value and purpose as engaged citizens of the Commonwealth.
Has anyone defined what success means?
We have summatively defined success, but I don't think that our state accountability system can fully gauge the success for students as a whole picture. That is a part of the puzzle, but there are other things that are in place, and I'll give you an example.
No, that's okay. I'm going to take that as a no. My second question, if I may, is it possible that we're overburdening our students? Overburdening our teachers and burdening our students, because as we look at the numbers, we're adding more and more information, we're adding more and more consultations, we're adding more and more projects, but we're not getting a better product. Is it possible, and it's a yes or no question, is it possible that we are overburdening our teachers and our students with information?
I would say not in this area, no, sir.
Interesting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple of questions, if I may. One actually goes back, and I think I asked this back in November when we met, talking about the public comment and looking at your slide on the review and selection. This is the 21 member. I'm just going to kind of piggyback on what was said before. In terms of public comment and parent input, on that particular task force, are those task force members paid?
No, sir. It's voluntary.
Okay. So I just want to reiterate in terms of, I think it would be a fantastic idea to put parents on that task force for a lot of reasons, which we could discuss. But I think even just having that persona there of a parent lens that is not a professional lens, just a parent that cares about their child and cares about their child's education, would be a wonderful move. On the same slide, you talked about the guidance and resources, the consumer guides for reading and writing and math and science. When we look at grade level standards and we say by the time you are third grade, you ought to be able to read. By the time you are in fifth grade, you ought to be able to do this particular math. When we look at testing scores, they are consistently going down every year in reading, writing, and math. And I would venture to say that we are actually getting away from those standards in terms of education in Kentucky. So can you tell me, when we are looking at all of this curriculum and looking at these standards, how are we still declining in public schools with our test scores?
So I think, Representative Lockett, that part of this initiative was really put into place after the pandemic. And so I am very hopeful that based on research around implementation data, that in 3 to 5 years, we will start to see movement upward in both reading and writing, mathematics, science, and in all of those tested subject areas as a result of teachers having access to the high quality resources. And certainly it is a matter of equity for students. And so as more and more districts make those adoptions, It usually takes about 2 years. So the first year, they're learning the resource, but we still see gains in the formative assessments that students take, so the universal screeners, the diagnostics, the classroom assessments. But to start to see the summative data move, it's on average about 3 to 5 years. But again, part of the measurement of our effectiveness will be on those assessment measures, and we want to ensure that students are growing in those academic outcomes across the board.
One more question, Mr. Chair, if you would. I guess so this is coming from a parent myself. My son graduated high school last year, and from a great district. Very grateful for that. And I guess I want to hear from the KDE, and since you're the one that's sitting here, do you understand in terms of test scores, in terms of grade level standards, and this is just kind of a yes or no, do you understand the frustration that I believe parents feel all across this Commonwealth with our education and the standards that we see today?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Senator Rocky Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is probably just more of a clarification than it is anything. But when we refer to textbooks, I know when my boys were in high school and college, they didn't have textbooks. Everything was an ebook. And so does our curriculum generation for high standards, I'm assuming that it includes ebooks and everything to do online as opposed to that traditional textbook that we think about?
Absolutely. Yes, Senator. So there's typically some sort of print resource for the teacher. And depending upon the content area, there are often other deliverables and things that they would utilize in class. But the majority of them now do have some sort of a digital component, and that may be used in the Tier 1 space, so in the school day, but oftentimes that also can be utilized at home for further enrichment for that student.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even have backpacks anymore. I mean, they just took their iPad in and into school and out of school, and that was pretty much it. So, okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you. And I would echo the involvement of parents, but you guys understand that. My question is, I'd like for you to complete your answer where you were interrupted about what defines success.
So one of the amazing things that's happening across the Commonwealth is that local districts are coming together to develop portraits of a learner or portraits of a graduate. And so within these community created portraits, it identifies key characteristics of success down to that local community. So in some ways, it's things that you would expect. So they want students to have access to critical thinking. They want them to be engaged citizens. But then other districts have very specific nuance that have built out that portraits. And I would say that local superintendents would argue that that portrait of a learner in association with the summative results truly give the true picture of quote unquote success for students in their community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the presentation. In considering all the controversial social issues that our schools have addressed and that have gained so much attention over the last couple years, is there a formal process in place to, when considering these materials, textbooks, curriculum, to identify these issues within the material? And is there a formal process to identify and a formal process to address these issues up front? We talk about having parents on this commission, and are we making more efforts to address these issues up front rather than it getting into the school system and protest and all of that stuff?
Thank you for the question, Senator Carroll. I think so. Part of the curriculum development process, when we look at that communication plan, when we look at the stakeholder feedback, at that time, if it's functioning as it should, then there would be multiple opportunities before a district makes an investment in a resource to get feedback from families, from communities that would express concerns about either a text or a task within the resource itself. Now, once that resource is adopted, there's also, as I know you are aware, the Senate Bill 5 that allows for parents to bring forward concerns or complaints about materials that would be harmful to their students.
So how does KDE address that as far as recommendations? What is the policy when it comes to those issues when looking at text or curriculum?
So the beautiful thing about the statute is that there's a very clear process that would be delineated for parents and families to go through that is overseen by the principal. And we have, of course, published that process and guidance as well. We did, as a result of this work with the LOIC, we were able to make an adjustment to the policy that we had online to ensure that it was aligned with that particular statute. And there's language in that regardless of the outcome of the principal, the superintendent, the student's parents can still say they do not want their child to have access to that information, to that resource.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last question, Representative Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, presenters. I have a two-part question. The first is just simple information that you've already said,
Okay.
but for my benefit. Can you tell me again the number of school districts that are currently voluntarily reporting?
So there are 136 districts who completed the 23-24 voluntary survey.
Thank you. And do we have any data on student performance in those districts as opposed to student performance in districts that don't provide that data?
So we are tracking that. I am so happy to report. So as part of our third-party evaluation for the Kentucky Reading Academy's letter training, so this is one small picture, but they did analyze the results of grades 4 and 5, and the students who had access to an HQIR outperformed those students who did not have access to it. And so part of what I am very hopeful we'll be able to do with the new statewide reading research center is that we can really drill down very granularly that these programs or these resources are working better or best for Kentucky students. That should not be a secret, but we need the evidence basis for Kentucky specific students specifically.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had one more question come in. Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There may be a couple of three if you'll bear with me, if it's possible. First, thank you. And secondly, how many subject matters are covered under the commission? So I'm going to assume there's a reading subject or subjects, math. How many subjects are covered or are trying to be covered under this process currently?
So right now, Representative Petrie, we have completed the process for reading and writing, mathematics and science. We are in this next academic year creating the consumer guide for social studies. And I will be honest in that will be the hardest content area that we've tackled to date, but certainly extremely important. And then after that, we can start to look at some of the other content areas, but we wanted to ensure that we addressed first the content areas that were a part of 158.6453 and standards review.
Very good. Mr. Chair, the issue's been brought up once or twice about success, and I know you know this, but you're also sitting there under cameras and lights and everything else. So sometimes we think about, well, what knowledge have they picked up? What facts do they know? What substance do they have? But I think if we look at KRS 158645, it speaks entirely in terms of capacities. Mm-hmm. So you can go through those 1, 2, 3 through 8 and generally talks about capacities to understand, to appreciate. It would be things like communication skills, knowledge of economic, social choices, core values and qualities of good character and moral decision making, understanding government processes and how they affect the student as an adult, self-knowledge of mental and physical wellness, grounding in the arts sufficient to understand their cultural and historical context, sufficient preparation to choose to pursue life's work intelligently, and skills to enable them to compete favorably with others in and out of state. All that stuff is on capacities. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that particular statute. I think it started in 1990, has been amended a little bit over time, but that's really the guidepost of where we're trying to go. And those words can change and the understandings can, but that is the definition of success by statutory definition. The process, I've read through the information that we received, and this is like the perfect Byzantine labyrinth of administrative malaise. You know, it's just like, how could this ever keep up with textbooks? Sure, maybe so. But when you get to things that are churned out digitally now, I don't see how in the world this could ever keep up with anything. So it looks like, just rule of thumb, yeah, I'm not sure this commission has any viability or whatsoever again. Probably good that it hasn't had funding put into it in the recent years, because it really needs to be remade.
Yes, sir.
I would submit one thing for just think about, rather than mandated reports, I hope it does get remade first. But rather than mandated reports, you might want to consider that any appropriations made to be utilized for textbook resource educational resources shall not be utilized by a local district unless it's an HQIR. That way, once you've identified those things and they've gone through proper process, you don't have to worry about whether somebody is or isn't. They're either paying for it out of their own pocket, or if they're using appropriated money, they're going to have an HQIR.
That would be a very powerful political lever. Yes,
I'm not
thank you.
suggesting that it be done. I'm just saying suggested for consideration. That's
Yes,
all.
sir.
Thank you, Representative Lockett.
I just have a quick follow-up actually to that. Are there other states like that we look at? Like, in other words, are we taking all of these textbooks or materials or online things and starting from scratch just in Kentucky? Or is there like something we go, hey, Tennessee approved it, it's probably good, we'll take it too? So are we either taking other states' recommendations, piggybacking on that, or do we completely start kind of from scratch from our own stuff?
So we are able to start from scratch, in essence, with the Kentucky educators who are curated by Ed Reports. And so they have established green-rated resources that more broadly across the nation, but there are true Kentucky folks who are looking at the resources through our specific lens. Thank you.
Thank you much, and I appreciate the presentation today, the conversation today. I see no other questions, and I appreciate you all coming and presenting.
Thank you. Thank you.
so
Thank you,
much.
members of the committee.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, our next meeting is set for July the 11th with nothing else on the agenda today. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.